When I first found out about this place, I didn't think it would turn my life around. I've always been attracted to architecture, old, gloomy, with peeling plaster, rusty window grills, and a silence that seemed to whisper something from the past to you. My name is Jake, and I document abandoned buildings. I take pictures, write articles, and sometimes shoot videos for the channel. No romance, just a job. There are enough such places in my city, but when I came across photos of an old private psychiatric hospital, my interest intersected with something more personal. This building, apparently, was closed in the late 90s, for economic reasons, according to reports. However, none of my sources could remember the name of the head physician, no interviews with the staff, and certainly not a single patient who had ever commented to the press. Everything seemed to disappear with the last exhalation of the institution. From the outside, the building looked like hundreds of others, a 3-story brick building wrapped in ivy, in the center of which rusty letters hung above the main entrance, barely visible under the layer of time. There was a phone booth nearby, knocked out from the inside. It was all surrounded by a metal fence, which I climbed over without any problems. But it's not about the fence, or the main entrance. It all started with a map that I found in the archive of the local municipality. It was a technical diagram of the building, which clearly indicated a descent below ground level, 2 floors underground, according to legend. But there's nothing in the official papers about the underground levels. I didn't go there right away. First, I took off the outer perimeter, went into the main hall, walked through the floors. Everything was as expected: broken chairs, scraps of old magazines, remnants of beds in the wards. The standard set. I even found a rusty wheelchair, as if it had been put there specifically for the atmosphere. It was only when I had almost lost interest that I noticed one trapdoor in the floor, half hidden under a layer of construction debris. I wouldn't have noticed if it hadn't been for the smell. He wasn't rotten. It was a metallic, raw iron smell, like in the basements of old houses where boilers stood. Something was pulling me there, as if something was still breathing inside. At first, I went down on the first level, just a staircase leading down a few meters. There was a former boiler room and several storerooms. It's dusty, but not dangerous. I was almost disappointed when I saw a wall in the far corner, behind which, by the sound, there was an empty volume. I hit the brick a couple of times, and one of the blocks moved inwards with a slight creak. There was a passage behind it, narrow as a ventilation shaft, and damn dusty. At first I thought it was another maintenance tunnel, but then I noticed wiring hanging along the wall and switches, one of which was handwritten, "Lower level, light." When I pressed the button, one lamp lit up. The second blinked and went out. That was enough to see that I was in the hallway. Not concrete, like in bunkers, but brick, like the old basements of the 19th century. The walls were covered with white tiles, some cracked, some stained with something dark. There are staggered tiles underfoot, dirty and sticky. But there was something wrong in this basement. It didn't seem like just a technical room. This place looked like an operating area, or an isolation zone. But all this was in a psychiatric hospital, which no one wanted to talk about. I walked slowly, turning on the camera on my chest. There were massive iron doors along the corridor, like prison doors. Each one had a plaque with faintly erased names or numbers. Behind one door is a bed fastened to the floor with chains. In the other is a table with 3 handcuffs bolted to the surface. All of these rooms were furnished in different ways, but each felt the same idea: isolation, control, and something unofficial. I found the first note in room 17. The paper was yellowish, but the ink was almost not faded. There were lines by hand. If anyone is reading this, please do not open the 23rd. I do not know who gave the order, but after that day we were all forced to sign a waiver. We didn't know what to do with her body. It hasn't cooled down even after a day. I didn't sleep for 3 days after that. The 23rd should not be open. Close it back up. There was no signature. Only the date, but it was smeared, as if a finger had been passed over the ink. I froze, looking at the signs. Number 23 was at the end of the corridor. And the door there looked different, thicker, with 2 locks, and a gap for observation covered with putty. My hands were shaking. I knew I had to leave. But it's moments like this that make me who I am. I walked over. Carefully, I inserted the screwdriver into the lock. A click. The second click is tighter. And as soon as I opened the door, I almost threw up. Smell? It wasn't just the smell of decay. It was a persistent, oppressive smell, as if someone had left meat in a cramped box for several months. And yet, there was no body inside. There was a table in the room, and in the middle of it was a leather chair that looked like a surgical chair. Next to it is a metal cabinet with tools. Everything is covered with dust. On the wall is a map of the nervous system, pierced with nails. There's a photo in the corner. An old one, in black and white, where a woman in a bathrobe stood next to a child strapped to a bed. On the back of the photo was written, "The protocol has been interrupted." I didn't know what to look for, but I understood. It wasn't psychiatric treatment. It was something from the category of punishment, isolation, perhaps revenge. All the documents were destroyed, all the witnesses disappeared. And only the photographs, these rooms, and the foul smell made it clear that something had happened here that no one wanted to remember. I left that room, and as soon as I slammed the door behind me, I heard a thud. I froze, not immediately believing what I had heard. The pulse in his temples beat sharply, with painful recoil. I stayed standing in front of that damn door, listening. It was quiet. Very quiet. Too much. It's like the basement is hiding with me. Maybe a rat. Maybe an old part of the ceiling has fallen off. Maybe. I tried to believe it, but my hands were already cold and sticky. I went back without turning on the light. I just felt the walls, step by step. Every step sounded like a dull gunshot in my ears. At that moment, I realized that something in this place clings to the psyche, not through the visual, not through the sounds, but through the inner feelings. It was as if it was breathing through the walls. I felt like an intruder, not just a guest. When I returned to the central corridor, where the stairs go up, a wave of relief washed over me, as if I had climbed out of the water and breathed in for the first time. The light from the upper floor was coming from behind the ajar door, and I ran there without turning around. He locked the hatch behind him and pushed the trash back. All closed. Hiding it. Forget it. But I couldn't forget. After a couple of days, I couldn't stand it anymore and started reviewing the camera footage. The first part is nothing unusual, just an old basement. But when the camera turns to door 23, there, in the very corner of the frame, I see movement. Not a silhouette, not a figure. It's just like something has slid down from the ceiling. Like a drop. It was as if the ceiling was breathing. I rewound back and forth. Nothing. Just this moment. Just this frame. I turned off the video and didn't watch it anymore. I didn't post the material. At all. I didn't even edit it. It was all on the hard drive, and I put it in the farthest drawer. But even that wasn't enough. About a week later, I started having dreams. At first I thought it was just overwork. Then I noticed that every dream has the same fragment. I'm walking down the same hallway. Always by the 23rd. And the door is always ajar. I always look in, and nothing happens. But I wake up sweating, feeling like I've seen more than I remember. I went back to the archive. Not to the building, but to the city archives. And I came across one strange mention. It turns out that the building wasn't a psychiatric hospital before. It once belonged to a private family, which handed it over to the city on the condition that it be used exclusively for isolated detention of people dangerous to society. And nowhere is there a word about patients. Only general phrases. Persons who are not subject to rehabilitation were kept in conditions of increased control, medical measures were not applied. It wasn't an orphanage. It was a hiding place. The ones they didn't want to talk about. Probably political ones. Perhaps those who knew too much. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that all this was carefully washed. And someone really didn't want people to be interested. A couple of days after this discovery, a guy approached me in the parking lot. Tall, gray-haired, with a face that you forget right after a conversation. He didn't say anything. He just threw an envelope through my car window and left. There was a photo inside. That's the room. The same 23rd. Only in the photo it was cleaner, as if it were fresh. A woman was sitting on an armchair. Hands in handcuffs. And next to it on the wall, in black marker, was written, "Come back and finish." I stared at this phrase for about 10 minutes. Then I got up, went to the bathroom, turned on the faucet and just stood under the cold water. It didn't help. It wasn't just a warning. It was an order. Addressed to me personally. I didn't know who wrote it. But I knew that whoever did it was still watching. I started noticing oddities. Little things. The camera in the apartment started blinking. The neighbor began to leave earlier than usual and return later. One day I went to the mailbox and found a piece of paper under it. It was handwritten. I forgot to lock the 17th. It was already a threat. Clear. Without mysticism, without noise. Just a message from someone who knows where I've been, what I've seen, and what I shouldn't have touched. I've moved to a rented place. I turned off the internet. I burned all the copies of the video, except for one. It's in a safe place, but I won't tell you where. So I'm sitting here writing this. Not to complain. Not to scare. But to leave. So that at least someone would know that I haven't left the house for 3 days. I just sat there, staring at the laptop screen, where the cursor was slowly blinking in an empty document. I was trying to start writing a statement, trying to document everything that was happening. But every time I got to the description of the 23rd room, my fingers seemed to freeze on the keys. It wasn't fear that got in the way, but a feeling of utter meaninglessness. No one will believe it. No one's going to get in there. Even if I show you a photo. Even if I take you there by the hand, people will just see an old door and a dusty basement. And I've seen more behind it. I had to leave. To escape. At least for a couple of days. I packed my things, turned off my phone, and drove out of town to the house I rented before the whole story started. An ordinary wooden building near the forest, without neighbors, without cameras. I wanted to be alone there. Rethink everything. But on the evening of the same day, when I sat on the veranda for the first time with a cup of cheap coffee, an email arrived on my laptop. Without the sender. Without a theme. One file is a video. I didn't open it right away. I was just looking at the screen. My hands were shaking. Inside, everything already knew that this was not just an accident. This is it again. I looked out into the night, listened to the wind stirring the trees, and a dog howling in the distance, and I felt that they had found me even here. Opened. The video lasted 17 seconds. The camera was shaking. I recognized the hallway. The same dirty tile. The same peeling walls. Someone was walking, filming, but there were no footsteps. Just heavy breathing. At the 14th second, the camera turned to the left. Door 23 was wide open. And beyond it, the void. No furniture, no stains, no wallpaper. Just concrete and chains hanging from the ceiling. At the 17th second, someone whispered, "You're back." The video turned off. And immediately after that, the screen went black. Forever. I tried restarting the laptop, pulling out the battery, plugging it into another monitor, nothing. It burned down. He just died, like it was his last case. I spent the night on the floor without turning on the lights. Every curtain, every rustle outside the window, everything reminded me that I was not alone. I could feel my back all the time. It's like someone's standing there. If he doesn't look, he's worth it. Like security. Like silent control. It was no longer a place. It has become a system. Invisible, but real. In the morning I went to the city. I stopped by to see an old friend, a journalist, whom I hadn't seen in years. He was the only one I could trust with at least some of the truth. We sat down in his basement, poured cheap whiskey, and I told him everything. He listened in silence. Only at the end he asked, "Do you even realize that this is not a plot? This is not an article. This is a black mark. Where are you going, huh?" I showed him a photo of a woman in handcuffs. He was silent for a long time, then said, "Her name was Linda. She disappeared 15 years ago. She worked in the Department of Social Protection. I knew too much. I wrote too much down. She had a dictaphone. He was never found. It was new. I didn't even know why I had saved this photo, but now it was the key. We spent 2 days trying to find references to her cases, calls, and complaints. And in one entry, in a single certificate kept in the old police archive, it said, "The last location is an object of temporary isolation, not subject to disclosure." It wasn't just a basement. It was a place where the inconvenient were taken. And they did it without a trial. Without protocols. No cameras. They just cleaned it up. So that no one else interferes. It wasn't conspiracy theory. It was a banal, sinister, and completely real scheme. It was like an incinerator, but instead of garbage, people went there. We drove back to the building. At night. This time with a camera, with lights, with a plan. Just me and him. Everything was as before. No one was guarding. No one approached. We went down to the basement. I didn't stop this time. We've reached the 23rd. It was closed. But there was a tape recorder on the floor in front of the door. Old. Worn out. The plastic peeled off. I picked it up. It was turned on. The red light was blinking. I clicked play. A woman's voice. "If you're listening to this, then I'm already dead. They come at night. Without a form, without signs. They take it away and cut it out. Not organs. Stories." The recording stopped. We didn't listen to anything else. They just went out. Silently. Quickly. They left in complete silence. He left town the next morning. He said, "Forget it. Just forget it. Hide yourself." But I can't. All this does not let go. It's not a mystery. It's not a secret. It doesn't need to be solved. It needs to be lived through. And if you're reading this, you should know. Some doors are better not to open, not because there is horror behind them, but because they have the truth behind them. And the truth is always worse than any fiction that I stayed in the city. Not because he was brave, not because he wanted to prove something. I just couldn't leave. I couldn't go on living knowing that all this would just remain in my memory, like an unfortunate episode, like a dream that needs to be forgotten. But it wasn't a dream. It was part of the present. And I felt that if I closed my eyes now, if I ran away, then it was all for nothing. So I'm just another one who didn't say anything. I started collecting everything I knew. Photo, audio recordings, screenshots of emails, fragments of the video. I created duplicates. I recorded everything on external hard drives. I hid one of them in the ventilation of a rented apartment. I took the other one to the library and put it between the pages of an old encyclopedia. I didn't know how long I would live, but I wanted at least something left. At least some truth. The paranoia didn't come immediately. At first, I just noticed familiar faces too often. The same man in a blue jacket on the subway, then at my house. A woman with a child who looked in my direction for too long. Then there are silent calls. Then there was the feeling that someone was in the apartment when I wasn't there. There's a book on the table that wasn't there this morning. An open tab in the browser, which I definitely did not open. I didn't tell any more reporters or acquaintances. I just started recording everything on a dictaphone. My thoughts, dates, places, everything in a row. Sometimes it's your feelings. I even recorded my own fear. I spoke out loud when I realized that I was starting to lose my mind. But it all culminated in something very simple. Letter. Paper. In the mailbox. There is only one sheet inside. Without a signature. Without a name. One question printed in black letters. How much longer do you need to shut up? It wasn't a threat. It was a choice. They offered me silence. Oblivion. Disappearing without consequences. Simply. Stop. Don't dig any further. Don't look for Linda. Don't talk. Not to remember. I sat with this letter all night, looking out the window, where cars were passing along the road, ordinary people were going to work, and I thought, but they're right. Silence is easier. But the morning brought something else. I have another email in my mail. This time it's from Linda. No, not alive. From someone who knew her. Who knew what I was looking for. Who knew the 23rd door. Who also lost someone there. It was a short letter. With coordinates? No, with an indication. 3rd floor, between the archives. A secret passage behind a metal cabinet. You're not the only one looking. I went there right away. I wasn't thinking. I didn't sleep. I just went. The old administrative building, which once housed the Department of Social Protection. Now it's a technical archive. Unguarded, dilapidated. I entered as usual. No noise. I went up to the 3rd floor. A long corridor. Dust. Rotten panels. And at the very end is a rusty cabinet full of folders. I pushed him away. There's a wall behind it. But the wall is cracked. I pressed it. The panel gave way. A narrow gap opened. I went in. There was a corridor inside. Narrow, smelling of damp and time. Metal doors without handles. Cameras? Archives? Or something that has been hidden for years. I walked, barely breathing. And suddenly I heard a sound. Someone was writing it down. The microphone clicked, as in the old devices. I turned the corner. There was a man sitting there. Old. Hunched. With a voice recorder. He raised his head. His face was covered with scars. But the eyes were alive. He said, "It's too late. You came when everything was already rotten. But if you keep quiet, you will become a part of them. Only loud voices disappear. Whisper lives longer." He handed me the tape. I took. It was handwritten, recording. Past. Don't edit it. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't ask why he stayed. He just left. He went outside. He inhaled. The city was the same. People were in a hurry. They were laughing. They were shouting into their phones. And no one, not a single person, knew that there was a living burial right below them. Not bodies. And the stories. The fates. Facts. People who were erased not by death, but by silence. I'm writing this down in a notebook right now. With a pen. Because technology can disappear. The electricity may be lost. But the paper will remain. Someone will find it sometime. He'll read it. And maybe he wants to dig deeper. But it won't be my story anymore. Mine ends here.